Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any thrilling episodes. In the previous episode, an unexpected twist shocked us all. Tung, the man who kept everyone guessing as he stood between the line of good and evil, finally chose to turn back. He became an undercover police officer, secretly cooperating with the investigation team, gathering evidence to bring the dangerous criminal John to justice. At the same time, James, still caught in a web of misunderstandings with Dipe, had a fateful conversation with Tung. What he heard crushed his heart. It was all part of John's wicked scheme. And even worse, Dipe, the woman he loves with all his heart, was the next target in a brutal kidnapping plan. Overcome with guilt and fear, James rushed to find Dipe, hoping to explain, to be forgiven, but more than anything, to protect her from the shadows lurking behind. Will the misunderstanding between them be cleared up? Will James make it in time to save Dipe before it's too late? And will their love after so many storms be strong enough to defeat all of John's malicious schemes? All will be revealed in the next episode. Don't miss it. Hit subscribe and stay with us through every heart-stopping twist. During the days without James, Dipe's world became blurred, as if someone had drained all the colors from it. No more laughter. No more warm eyes to greet her each morning. No more gentle hands guiding her through the uncertainties of life. Only a suffocating silence remained in her heart, shattered into pieces. She still tried to live as if everything were normal, still woke up on time, made herself a cup of coffee as always, went to class, went to work, but just a familiar scene, or an old song playing by chance, and the tears would well up uncontrollably. Nights were the hardest. When the city lit up, when everyone sank into sleep, Dipe would sit quietly by the window, clutching James's old jacket. His familiar scent still lingered, just enough to make her heart ache, yet distant enough to make the longing feel like a slow, persistent wound. She asked herself 100 times, where did I go wrong? She remembered every look he gave her, every promise he made. I'm not going anywhere. I'll always be here, by your side. But now where was he? With whom? Could it be with Trang, that perfect, beautiful girl who always stood out in any crowd? The thought sliced through Dipe like a knife. She tried to push it away, tried to convince herself that James wasn't like that. But the long silences, the unanswered calls, the messages that stayed delivered forever slowly made her start to believe that maybe, just maybe, he had truly left her. She blamed herself for not being good enough, not being strong enough, for loving him so much she forgot how to love herself. She told herself she had to try harder, study more, work like crazy, as if proving she deserved that love. But the harder she tried, the more hollow she felt, because nothing could fill the void James had left behind. James wasn't just a lover. He was her peace, her motivation, the light that had pulled her out of the darkest days. Losing him felt like being dragged back to square one, abandoned, once again lost in her own world. And sometimes Dipe would whisper through her tears, if you've truly forgotten me, then please forget my smile too, because I no longer have the strength to smile. As for James, ever since the day he saw Dipe with Tung, his heart felt like it had shattered into pieces. At first, it was shock, then came a bitter, gut-wrenching ache, like the world was playing a cruel joke on his trust and feelings. The image of Dipe smiling beside Tung, her hand accidentally resting on his, and then the next morning seeing Tung riding with Dipe down the old street, a place filled with their shared memories. It all felt like knives carving deeper into a heart already bruised and scarred. He once believed he truly knew Dipe, that she was the only one he could fully trust in a world full of manipulation. But now, with those scenes replaying over and over like a silent accusation, James began to doubt the very woman he loved most. Maybe she chose Tung. The cold thought rushed through him, and he gripped the armrest tightly to stop himself from crying out, have I been blind? Is Dipe really someone who plays with hearts like this? But then reason fought back. No, that wasn't the Dipe he knew. His Dipe was always sincere, always quietly enduring pain just to avoid troubling others. She was the one who had accepted everything, just to stay by his side, a silent, reserved CEO who rarely shared his inner thoughts. The contradiction tore James apart every single day. He didn't know whether to move forward or stop, whether to confront the truth or continue hiding behind his pride. He was afraid that if he saw Dipe now, he wouldn't be able to control his emotions, that he might say something that would hurt them both, but missing her he couldn't stop. Every time he saw the empty chair across from him at dinner, James would fall into a heavy silence. Every night coming home, his spacious apartment echoed only with the ticking of the clock. Cold and lonely, his mother, always perceptive, started to notice something was wrong one evening. She gently asked, "I haven't seen Dipe around lately. Is something going on between you two?" James avoided her gaze, replying quietly, "She's been busy, her schedule's packed these days." But his mother simply smiled, placed a hand on his shoulder and said softly, "Dipe is a good girl. I saw it in her eyes. She truly loves you. Don't let the one you love suffer. James, love her more." Her words were like a gentle touch to his soul, but it stirred a storm of memories and longing within him. That's when James realized he had stepped back for too long. While Dipe might be hurting from a misunderstanding, he had chosen silence, a cowardly escape. As James was talking with his mother, a sudden ringtone pierced the air. Cutting through their conversation, he glanced at the screen. It was his most trusted subordinate, the one he had secretly assigned to track John's every move. Over the past weeks, James's heart clenched. He stood up, leaned toward his mother, and whispered, "Excuse me, Mom, I have something urgent to take care of." Before she could ask anything more, James had already hurried out of the villa. A short while later, he stopped at a deserted open lot, the prearranged meeting point. His subordinate was already waiting, face tense and eyes full of concern. "What is it?" James asked curtly, his voice low and cold. "Boss James, it's bad. John has made his move. He's targeting Miss Dipe and plans to use her to threaten you. This is no longer speculation. I intercepted a conversation between him and one of his top henchmen. His plan is to kidnap her, then force you to surrender your power, your assets, everything." James clenched his jaw, but the subordinate continued without pause. "And the worst part, he's not acting alone. He's partnered up with Tongue." In that instant, James felt his entire body freeze. "No way," he muttered, his eyes darkening. "Yes," the subordinate nodded grimly. "Tongue is secretly collaborating with John. The two of them orchestrated this entire act to drive a wedge between you and Miss Dipe. Tongue has been using your recent rift to get close to her, planting seeds of doubt and pain in her heart. Meanwhile, John works behind the scenes, setting traps. Their end goal, to make her leave you and end up with Tongue." The wind swept across the empty lot, kicking up dust. But James felt nothing except the chaos pounding in his chest. Painful images flashed through his mind: Dipe's sorrowful gaze, her forced smile when they last met, and all those silent departures, each one carrying a wound he hadn't been brave enough to heal. All of it started with him, because he stayed silent, because he didn't trust her. "If I don't act now, she'll truly fall into their hands." A spark of fierce determination reignited in James's eyes. Without another second of hesitation, he turned and sprinted back to his car. The engine roared to life like a long-suppressed fury finally unleashed. The car tore down the sun-drenched road, racing past every familiar turn. In James's heart, only one thought remained: "Dipe, don't be afraid. No matter what, it's me who will reach you before it's too late." As soon as James stepped through the gate, his eyes locked onto a familiar figure. Dipe was standing quietly on the porch. Her back was turned, unaware that the person she had been waiting for all this time was finally approaching. Her hair swayed gently in the breeze, and her figure looked noticeably thinner. James's heart tightened. He had once turned his back on her because of a misunderstanding. He had walked away coldly. leaving her with 1,000 silent wounds, and now, with the truth finally coming to light, all he wanted was to erase the distance, hold her, protect her just as he had once promised, without hesitation. James rushed forward and pulled her into his arms. Dipe. At the sound of his voice, Dipe's body trembled. She turned around, and the moment she saw James, tears rolled down her cheeks. All the pain, frustration, and loneliness she had kept inside suddenly erupted. She sobbed uncontrollably, throwing herself into his embrace, arms wrapped tightly around him. James, you really came, she choked out. James held her tightly, as if letting go would mean losing her forever. He gently ran his fingers through her hair, his voice low and trembling. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry for doubting you. I was wrong. All this time, I avoided you, stayed silent, but my heart never stopped loving you, never stopped thinking of you. Dipe. They held each other as the soft afternoon sunlight bathed them in gold, as if cleansing away all the lingering sorrow. In that moment, every wall between them crumbled. Their love was too deep, too powerful enough to overcome any misunderstanding or wicked scheme. After a long time in each other's arms, they slowly calmed down. James gently led Dipe inside, and the two sat across from each other in a familiar space that had long felt distant. James was the first to speak. That day I saw you with Tongue. You two looked so close I got jealous. And instead of asking you, I chose to stay silent, to withdraw. I thought you had changed. Dipe looked into his eyes, her voice still trembling but sincere. James, that day, a group of thugs tried to rob me. I was panicked, didn't know what to do. Thankfully, Tongue happened to pass by and helped me. He got a minor injury, so I brought him home to rest for a while. That's all. Between me and Tongue there was never anything. The one I've loved from the very beginning to now has always been you. James took her hand, his eyes red with emotion. I was a fool, I should have trusted you. Should have protected you, not abandoned you when you needed me most. Dipe smiled through her tears, gripping his hand tightly, but you came back. That's what matters most. From that moment on, the misunderstandings were finally cleared. They sat together for a long time, saying everything they had never said, sharing feelings they thought had long been buried. As the sun faded from the sky, James decided to stay with Dipe, sharing dinner like they used to in the early days of their love. The meal was simple but full of warmth. Dipe smiled more, and James felt lighter in his heart. There was no more distance, no more hesitation. After all the trials, after wounds that once seemed impossible to heal, they had found their way back to each other, and this time their love was stronger, deeper than ever before. That afternoon, after all the misunderstandings had been cleared, James and Dipe stayed by each other's side as if they didn't want to be apart. For even a single moment, every glance, every gesture was filled with the love that had been bottled up during all those painful days. Apart. They went into the kitchen together. Dipe cooked, and James helped her prepare the bowls and chopsticks. There were no more hesitant words or distant silences, only soft laughter and warm gazes. The kind they once feared they'd never share again. The meal that day was simple, but it carried the feeling of a little family, something both had long yearned for. They ate together, then brewed a pot of hot tea and sat on the porch, watching the sunset slowly descend. The breeze was gentle, and Dipe rested her head on James's shoulder, while he quietly held her hand. There was no need for many words, being together was enough. After tea, James firmly insisted that Dipe not lift a finger. He cleaned up, washed every bowl, wiped every glass with meticulous care. Dipe sat in a chair, watching him with a soft smile. To her, James was no longer the cold, distant CEO, but simply the man she loved, trying his best to make up for what had been lost. That night, the emotional whirlwind left Dipe exhausted. James gently helped her lie down, then pulled up a chair and sat beside her bed. But when he saw she still couldn't rest easily, he quietly lay next to her and whispered, "Sleep, my love. I'm here, I'll keep watch over your dreams." Dipe smiled, gently holding his hand. She drifted off into a peaceful sleep, the first true peace she had felt in a long time. James, however, did not sleep. He lay silently, watching her serene face in the soft glow of the bedside lamp. His heart ached with every beat. Still weighed down by guilt, he knew he had hurt this woman with his silence, his doubts, and his retreat. Dipe, I'm sorry. I should have protected you from the very beginning. And in that moment, another truth became crystal clear. The robbery Dipe encountered, it couldn't have been random. It had to be John. He had staged it, trying to scare her, to push her into vulnerability, to more easily manipulate James. And now that the plan had failed, James knew John wouldn't stop. John, what will you try next? James tightened his grip on Dipe's hand, not just to reassure her but himself. He knew this was only the beginning. There were still traps ahead, dangers yet to be revealed. But now, he and Dipe were truly together again, and no matter what storm may come, he would never let go of her hand again. That night, while Dipe was fast asleep, James remained beside her, his eyes never leaving her face. He knew that after all the misunderstandings and pain, they had finally found their way back to each other, but that happiness felt fragile, like a faint light breaking through after a storm, and beyond the lingering shadows, threat still lurked in silence. James gently tightened his grip on Dipe's hand. His gaze no longer held regret, but fierce determination. No matter what happens, he would never let anyone hurt her again. But elsewhere, in a darkened room, John let out a cold laugh as he listened to a report from one of his men. James, you think you've won. The game is only just beginning. Will James and Dipe be strong enough to face the brutal challenges ahead? Will Tung, the one who once betrayed them, go to any lengths to reclaim the love he lost? And John, what other cruel schemes is he about to unleash? Is love truly strong enough to conquer all? Or will this next storm drown everything in sorrow? Don't miss the next episode to uncover breathtaking twists and shocking turns no one saw coming.
Xin chào tất cả mọi người. Mọi người ơi, chúng ta lại được gặp nhau trong video hôm nay trong cuộc tình của Diep và Diệp. Mọi người cũng có thể thấy là trong video hôm nay thì Diep và Diệp đã trải qua những giây phút hiểu lầm được hóa giải rất là hạnh phúc. Sau những hiểu lầm, những cay đắng mà trải qua thì tình yêu của họ thậm chí còn thắm thiết và yêu thương nhau hơn rất là nhiều so với trước kia. Nhưng chưa thấy như thế chưa có thể là điểm dừng, chưa có thể là kết thúc hạnh phúc được, bởi vì họ còn đang rất nhiều khó khăn cần phải tiếp tục trải qua. Họ phải tiếp tục đối mặt với kế hoạch đen tối của tên John đang bày ra. Vậy thì hai người sẽ dùng tình yêu to lớn của mình và như thế nào để hóa giải được những khó khăn ấy, và tình yêu của họ sẽ tiếp tục đi đến đâu, thì mời mọi người tiếp tục xem video tiếp theo ở phần sau nha. Mọi người hãy đăng ký kênh, sau đó bật chuông thông báo để không bỏ lỡ bất kỳ video nào. Và nếu như thấy kênh thấy video hay và ý nghĩa, hãy like, share cũng như là subscribe để ủng hộ kênh mình nha.